everyone, and welcome to Let's Heal with Beth Jones. That's me, your host. My mission is to bring the power of healing to trauma and abuse survivors. That's why every guest on this show will bring you an amazing story of healing in action. So come on, everyone, let's heal. Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. Of course, that's me, your host. I have with us today a wonderful guest, my friend, Amber Larkins. Amber is a self-described serial entrepreneur, which I know we're going to talk about as we go through the conversation today. So let me welcome you, Amber, to the show. Thank you so much for being here. And would you please tell our guest a little bit more about what that means to be a serial entrepreneur for you?
Beth, thank you so much for having me. It's always nice to come on here and chat with you. I know it's not our first rodeo. We've had a conversation before when you come on my podcast, which we'll talk about. But yes, so I just fell in love with business and have dabbled in a lot of different things. I do think there is some type of strategy to my madness. But yeah, if I told you all the different things I had my hands in, it would seem like it was disconjointed and all over the place. But truly, I feel like it is all connected. And I feel like God really helps connect those dots and in a real impactful way. And my heart is really impact and just making an impact while I'm here on this earth, living this little life.
Yes, which is beautiful. And what we're all meant to be doing is having an impact on our fellow human beings. So if I were going to summarize, impact is a great word for what I think about when I think about your serial entrepreneurship, but a lot of it comes back to trauma and really healing, empowering, and storytelling on the backside of trauma, I think is really what most of your work is about. Am I right about that?
Yeah. And I can tell you how this come to be. I don't want to say I was like born a storyteller or anything like that.
I wasn't either.
If you want me, I can just jump right into a little bit of my
Please.
background. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I was coming out of college, had no idea what I wanted to do. And I just took a real interest in fitness. I majored in business because I thought business would be a good thing to major in. And it seemed like it would cover many different facets of life. So I was in college and I got into fitness. And fitness is an amazing thing because it helps just really train your mindset in a whole lot of ways. And so I ended up moving after college, moved out to California, had a lot of experiences out there, and just dug myself a little bit into a hole out there away from family. You're like a young 20 something, just fresh out of college, and made a lot of bad decisions and got in a really dark place in my life. And during that time, just really contemplated suicide. I was on the verge of just not wanting to live anymore. I'm 25. I felt like I had wasted a lot of my life. At 25, you think you've wasted your life. But now I'm in my 40s and I look back and it's 25, you're just starting out. But it's amazing what mental health can do. And I never struggled with a mental health like disability or was never diagnosed with anything, but I did struggle with depression. And that was, I think, had a lot to do with it. I think a lot of my mental health was self-inflicted. I did things that caused me to be depressed and just really hard-headed. So I, sitting on the verge of suicide, I had the gym was like the only thing that I had. And that's when I met my husband. The day that I had really contemplated, I couldn't kill myself because I had these two little dogs. I didn't have kids at the time, so these were like my kids. I laid in bed for 3 days contemplating how I was going to do this, and I just couldn't because of my dogs. So I drag myself up out of the bed and I go to the gym and I'm working out, and my husband, who I didn't know was my husband at the time, comes up and he was just started talking to me. And I always thought this guy was a pretty good looking guy. So we started talking. Anyway, he introduced me to the Lord. And that's when I had been raised in church, but had never really been going full forward. I had never really invested or given my life to the Lord. During that time is when I gave my heart to the Lord. So fitness was very instrumental in that journey. We got married. We were married for 13 years and had two kids. And that marriage ended up ending as a result of an affair on his part. And that was a very difficult time. And I'll say that those are probably the two times that I was like the most depressed in my life, which
Mm,
was coming out of just making a lot of really bad decisions in California to then going through a divorce, 15 years later. And it was hard because I think that you really begin to struggle with what is like, why am I not good enough? What's wrong with me? And I was like right there at the 40-year mark too. So,
yeah.
you're already dealing with a whole lot of other things. And it was a struggle. And there was a lot of things that happened through that time of going through that divorce. And I made a decision like 3 months out of when I finally found out about this affair. He ended up leaving. And about 3 months after, I was listening to a podcast, and this podcast, the girl says, "Well, you get to choose. I write on my mirror every day, on my bathroom mirror, you choose." And me and my daughter, we live by that. You get to choose how you handle, how you deal with things. And it stuck with me. And I'm like, I'm bitter and I'm angry and I'm frustrated and I'm all these things. But at the end of the day, I get to choose. I don't get to choose what anyone else does, what he did, or I don't get to choose any of that, but I do get to choose what I do. And I made a decision in that moment that I am going to, this is not going to defeat me, that I am going to rise above this and I'm not going to retaliate. That's our human response to these things. We're just like, he's going out and doing these things. I'm going to go do them too. And it was like God spoke to me and said, no, not a good strategy. And God really walked with me through that entire process. And listen to that podcast to be an instrumental place in my mind of I will choose to rise above this. And from that moment, there was like, I don't want to say it was overnight. Things don't happen. They're not just for me. It's not just laid at my feet. It's like a process of going through this journey of making these decisions on a daily, weekly, monthly basis of I'm going to rise above this and God begins to give you little pieces of the puzzle of what you're going to build. And I began to really understand purpose, really begin to analyze in my own mind, like, why am I here? And if God is truly who God says he is, then he doesn't waste things. He doesn't he doesn't cause things like he didn't cause this situation to happen, but he will use it. The Bible says that all things work together for good for those that love him and is called according to his purpose. And I thought, if that's true, then he'll use this. And so I started really trying to figure out like how's God going to use this in my benefit and to benefit other people. So let me just go back to this whole thing of fitness because that has played a role through my whole life. When I got divorced, I had not worked. I had been a stay-at-home mom and I'd wanted to work. There was conflict about that in our marriage. My husband didn't want me to work. So coming out of that marriage, I'm like, oh my gosh, what do I do? What am I going to do? I've just spent 13 years being married and I don't have a resume of what I've done. I don't have a career. And I had started like a little side thing doing fitness photography.
Mm,
And so I reach out to a friend of mine. I'm just like, hey, she's really big in the fitness industry. I'm like, what can you put me in? So she starts like plugging me into all these different areas, fitness. And my business just grew.
mm,
And one of the things that I really found with fitness, though, is that I was seeing in the rise of social media, I was seeing there was a lot of like over sexualization in the fitness
mm,
industry.
yeah.
And as being a Christian and being a female, I'm like, I don't like that. I
Mm,
love being able to show your physique, and I know it takes a lot of hard work to get there, but I also don't like to exploit people. And I had a lot of conflict about that in my heart. And so I ended up really trying to like mold my business more as like appreciating the body, but not exploiting or over sexualizing it either. And it's a really hard, fine line to walk. But I started praying more and more about this. And God, you've given me this gift of photography, this hobby that I really love, but what do you want me to do with this thing? And I would hear when I was photographing women, they would open up to me. I don't know. I'm not sure why. Looking back, I think it's because I'm an empath and people just gravitate
Yeah,
to
yes.
share. But people would open up and they would share with me. They told me I would never be able to train. They told me I'd never be able to work out. They said I had photographed a girl that had cerebral palsy. They told her she would never be able to lift weights, and she's lifting weights. I photographed a lady who had her eye put out by domestic assault. Her boyfriend threw a bottle at her, put her eye out, and now she has this glass eye that she struggled with insecurities and all these things from.
Mm,
But there was multiple stories. I would hear these stories and I'm just like, I need to tell these stories, but I don't know how. What platform do I tell them on? Social media just didn't seem like enough,
mm,
but I knew they could be inspiring. So I started these photo shoots called Transformation Through Trauma. They were photo shoots that showcased trauma and then triumph. They photographed like they were two in one kind of. So we would photograph the raw emotion and very artistically. And I would just intuitively talk to people about their story. And then we would come up with a really artistic way of showing that. And then we would photograph their triumph. So, like where they're at today. I always had this vision of trauma to triumph or like broken to overcoming. And because I had a heart for fitness and for storytelling and for business, because at this time I'd started building my business and was learning a lot about business, got into some business masterminds and things. And so I'm just like, if I can showcase that, it really shows the embodiment of women. I worked with men too, but women were really my thing. And it's like,
mm.
women are overcoming and they've come out of these relationships where they've been hurt and broken and not felt like enough. I photograph women all the time who feel like they're not enough and are struggling with that. And so, fast forward to this was perfect, but it was really hard to find people that were willing to share their
Yeah.
story. I had gone to a retreat. I got invited out to photograph this business retreat on a private island in the BVI. And there was a lady, and I was there as a photographer. I was there working, and she spoke some things. God really downloaded some things through her into me. I come back from this retreat and I had already been thinking about starting a podcast to promote these photo shoots, but I come back and it's like doors just begin to open and I started this podcast. And so now I have my podcast. It's been up for 2 years now. It's through the trauma. So it's a spin off of the photo shoots that I was doing, but it's evolved into its own thing now. So now instead of just hearing stories and showcasing these stories, I get kind of this same mix of where I get to talk to a lot of times they are entrepreneurs, they are coaches, doctors, therapists, authors, people that have stories and they have a mission and they have a vision for trying to really be purpose driven and help people, but they also have these impactful stories. So the podcast has taken on its own animal now. And eventually I may bring back the photo shoots because I think there's a vision for that. And I think that there's a place for it. But right now, the focus is really on the podcast and getting
Podcast.
people's messages
Yeah.
out to those that
Yeah.
really need to hear it the most and whatever they're offering, be it different modalities for healing or supplements or
Mm.
services or whatever.
It's a beautiful story that you have. I am struck by how different our lives are, but how much alike they are. Very much the same, the path that we've been on to have healed and now to be doing something with it, creating some impact in the world, trying to help others. I'm the same as you. I just want to spread everybody's message. That's why I want them to hear you, everybody to
Yeah.
hear you talking about what it is that you do now and the impact you're making and how you're helping to spread other messages. So I would like to say to you that I am sorry about the pain that you've had in the past and any pain you may be even experiencing still now and that you might experience in the future, because you probably will. I'm sorry for all of that, but I appreciate your courage and your bravery and talking about that. So thank you very much for that.
Oh, yeah. I believe in there's power in the story. And
Yeah.
I think this is what I tell people. I'm like, if you see me, I see you. Like, you don't know what's going on, what someone's been through until they open up their mouth and start to talk about
Yeah.
what they've been through. You would never know some of the things that I've walked through. Even today we moved through that really quick. There's
Yeah.
depth there
Oh, yeah, of
that
course.
if I shared with your audience, they'd be like, "Oh my God, I didn't know you went through that." But that's where our power is, though,
It
in
is.
our voice. If we can't share that, we can't help people.
Yeah, that's right. And that's I think the beauty of what we're doing. And I think part of the gift that God gives, certainly given to you, and I believe has given to me as well, is that ability to find our way through storytelling and amplifying, using our voice when we might have been at times in our life when we didn't have a voice. And I was certainly in that place in my
Hmm.
past, but that's just part of my journey. And I know that what I'm doing now, the voice I have, what I'm doing is God's work and what God
Hmm.
wants me to be doing. And so naturally that storytelling ability going to give me that gift too, right? If the message is supposed to be out there, you're going to give me the tools to do it with. And certainly that has happened for me and for you. I just also just want to say to you, Amber, about being suicidal a couple of times in your life, that I'm so grateful that you're still here. You're such a light. And so I'm very grateful that you are here still with us to do everything that you're doing, but just to share the light and the love that you have in your heart, which is amazing. So thank you.
Well, thank you for
Thank
saying
your little
that.
dogs.
That's right. They saved my
Yeah,
life.
yeah, your dogs and your kids, right? So,
Yeah, my two little Yorkshire Terriers.
yeah, 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 I get that.
Um, yeah,
I
they
didn't
passed
know either.
away
I'm sorry.
now. That
I
they've
have that.
passed away now.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was probably 20 years ago.
Yeah,
They've since passed away, but they
yeah.
both died of old age. So
That's good.
lived
Yeah.
a very long, healthy life. That's another thing too. One of my driving passions with my podcast is that I don't want people to feel like they're alone. I laid in that bed for 3 days and I felt like I was so alone and there was no way out. I don't want people to feel like you're not alone. I don't want to say every single person has had suicidal ideations or any of that. I don't want to project that onto people, but I will say I've talked to a lot of people on my podcast that have had suicidal thoughts and ideations and things.
Mm,
And I hesitate to say it's normal, but I do think it is somewhat normal for our human existence to get into that place of depression. And
yes.
I want people to know you're not alone.
Yes.
I know
Agree.
where you're
Completely
coming
agree.
from. Yeah.
Yeah, and because I've never, I don't, I have to think back over it. I don't think I've ever experienced suicidal ideation myself, but I've certainly been in that place. We were talking about not being able to get out of bed for multiple days on end. I've been in that place, a really very dark and hopeless place where you really feel like, at the time when that was happening to me, I literally felt like my world was crumbling around me. And
Mm.
it was, because it needed to, because I needed to move past it and heal. But that hopelessness, that darkness, that despair, it just can be all consuming and a really hard place to come back from. I would have to imagine that most everybody as a human has experienced that at some point in their life, because we all experience suffering in some way. And that hopelessness so often is attached to that suffering that we're going through.
And
Yeah.
the thing that makes it hard for me is to think about people being in that place of darkness and feeling so alone. And I know there's
Mm.
times where you need to be alone. Like I've been
Hmm.
through periods in my life where it's like I really wanted to be alone. I wanted to process things on my own and just me and God. But there's sometimes when people don't want to be alone and they feel alone, like there's no one to call, there's no one that can relate to me. And this is where abuse comes in, where it's like if someone tells you you shouldn't feel that way or you're always the victim because you're depressed, to dismiss those kinds of
Mm.
thoughts is hard for people. And there's a fine line of loving someone like hard love, but then also being empathetic and merciful to someone as well. And I just wish that there was more skills for people. And this is really my heart behind my podcast. I want there to be skills for people because we're not taught these things in school. We're not taught how to navigate through emotions. We're not taught how to figure out what's going on or how to process things or how to feel
Mm-mm,
it and then let it
mm-mm.
go, how to get rid of suppressed emotions or suppressed trauma. We're not taught those things.
It's the work I do now is helping people to figure out how to do that for themselves using a variety of different tools. But you're right, we don't know how to do that. And I would have given anything to have had a me, someone who could have walked me down my pathway and said, here, this is how you can transform that suffering into a place in your life where for me now, I'm thriving in life. But it's a path I had to find on my own because you're right, they don't teach us that. There's no book out there that you can read that says this is how you do it, except mine, maybe is out there now. But you, we don't come with that. They're not part of the
Right.
life skills that we have. And so being able to have that experience myself and share it with us, it's part of the reason why I do it because it was so difficult. And luckily for me, you mentioned when you were talking earlier, you mentioned God pointing you in the way, like where you're supposed to be, and your path leads to this purpose, and this purpose leads to the next purpose. I've had the same experience where I know my life has been divinely led since I've been on this earth, but I can really see it since the intentional and focused part of my healing journey began, where literally the dots just connect one to the next, one to the next. I'm like, oh, there. I do have to say about that though, and I'll ask you about this too. I do have to say that when I get an idea in my head, I have learned to take the time to really seek whether or not it's my ego that's driving that idea or if it's truly the universe speaking to me saying, this is the next step in what you're supposed to be doing. And I've had plenty of ego things. So I'm like, okay, I'm not supposed to go that way. I could see that after I did the soul searching and the praying and the meditating about it. So have you had similar experiences?
Yeah, and I think for me, like scripture says, you shouldn't test God, but I do think that God is merciful. And I do think that there are times where if that's a question in our mind, could this really be the just way God's telling me to go, or is it ego? Is
Mm-hmm.
God in fact really telling me this? Because scripture also says test the voices that you're hearing to be sure it is God. And I think that sometimes for me, how I navigate that is I will just ask God to show me multiple signs for that. I believe in the power of synchronicity. I believe
Me
when
too.
God speaks, a lot of times he'll show you not just one, but he'll show you multiples. So I, personally, I think that's how I hear God a lot of times. It's like when I see things three, four, five times and I recognize it, oh my gosh, this is probably what God's telling me to do. With my
Yeah.
podcast, it was one of those things where it kept coming up. It was an idea in my mind and then it kept coming up. And then doors just started to swing open to the point I had like someone coaching me on doing the podcast before I even started it. So it was like, and that was just it was just an acquaintance, someone that I just knew. It's just funny to me how God does lead us in those ways. But yeah, I do think we gotta be sure that is God we're hearing.
Yeah, I've had that. I think that's cool as well when you start hearing the synchronicities repeating over and
Yeah,
over again. And then the path, just like everything that I've needed, like every direction that I've turned that I thought was the path that I was supposed to be going down, it's just been seamless. Everything's been there that I've needed. And also, the word that's been coming up a lot for me lately is the word easy. When we're in the place that we're supposed to be, and I think that is both the work that we're doing in the world, but also the relationships that we're in, particularly the ones that we choose. And there's not much we can do about the relationships that we're born into, but the ones that we choose to have around us and the work that we're doing. That word easy has been coming up so much for me recently, it's actively a word that's coming up because I find that there's no drama. I don't feel resistance. I don't feel like, oh, there's a major hurdle that I've got to figure out how to go over or around. It just is flowing so easily, which is really for me confirmation that I'm more than likely, there's no guarantees in life, but more than likely in the right place
that's
where I'm
right.
supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah, I think there's power
Yeah.
in that too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can we go back just for a minute to the pivot point for you when you were going through the challenges in your marriage and moving toward the divorce and the feeling you were having and all the emotions you were carrying that were the fear-based emotions. The pivot point, the podcast that you heard in that moment of knowing that you had a choice. And I want to ask you about that in terms of how profound, how profound that was to you. And the reason I'm asking is because my pivot point was a hypnotherapy session, which was quite profound to me. It's different. And I'm actually the only person I know of at this point that I've met who's had that experience. That was literally my awakening, my life altering event that moved me. And so I'm always curious about that. What is the particular moment or event that make people wake up and go, okay, I don't have to live like this anymore? And that's really what the pivot point is for me, the recognition of I'm suffering and I'm actually creating part of that suffering and I can do something about it. So just you talked about it as if it was something, you obviously remember it, that was the moment and something quite profound. But can you just elaborate a little bit more on that? Because you're listening to a podcast. So can you just talk a little more about it?
Yeah, and that might have planted the seed years and years ago about maybe I need to start a
Sure.
podcast. I don't know.
Maybe.
Because it was truly a profound moment. And if I had to talk a little bit more and give a little more detail about the divorce in general, I would say that the marriage had started to, as all marriages do. It's not, I listened to this motivational speaker and he says, death by a thousand cuts. And that's what happens when marriages start to fail. There's death by a thousand cuts. And it's not overnight. It's not like somebody just decide most of the time. I don't think people just decide, I'm going to go have an affair. Nope. There's things that's happening. And so the last 2 years of my marriage was really rough to the point that things had gotten really bad at home. I think the last 2 years, I had really prayed that God would change him because there was narcissism and it was playing out not only in my life, but then also in my kids.
Mm.
And I just had prayed and prayed that God would change him. And I just believed that God was going to change him. And I stuck in it. And so for the 2 years going into the divorce, I was like, oh, God's going to change this. That I knew that an affair would be the end, but I never thought that would happen. I was totally blown away by that. However, those last 2 years was so bad that I just felt like, is this going to be my life forever? Am I going to have to live in this forever? Because I really didn't believe in divorce. And being a Christian, I just didn't think it was the right thing to do. My views have changed a little bit on divorce now, having gone through what I've been through.
Yes.
So, but no judgment to anybody. You don't know what's going on in someone's house. So after I find out of this affair, I decided I was somewhat relieved, to be honest with you, because I was like, okay, now I'm free to walk away. I'm free to leave. But I was still in shock too, because I never thought that would happen. And I was, as a mom, you're like, now my kids are gonna, what's this gonna do to my kids? What's it gonna do to the family dynamics? Financially, what am I gonna do?
Yeah.
There's all of these questions. And I would say the first 3 months, I was just like blindsided, not really like just discombobulated, thrown off course, and just not really knowing. And this is when I started listening to podcasts, business
Hmm.
podcasts. I was like, I wanted to get into business and I had always wanted to work and to have a career. And I was like, I'm going to jump right into business. I thought it was going to be so easy. Just jump right in. And it's not. And I'm listening to this business podcast, and this is the girl who says this. She's business, but it's also motivational. And you get to have a choice. And so that was profound to me because in that moment, it was like, okay, because I get to choose, I don't have to, I can be the bigger person. I can choose God in this situation. I can choose to live for my kids. You look at people in your family, the family dynamics, and our family as a whole. And I'm just like, I'm not going to be this way. Certain people was this way or that way, and I'm not going to do that. I get to choose that. So it was like, it was freeing a little bit, like
Yes.
a little bit of freedom there. It's like, I get to decide. So that was profound. There was several other turning points that just really stuck with me, but yeah, that was definitely one of them.
So did you hear that podcast before or after you were divorced?
Oh, no, the divorce took 2 years. This was 3 months after we split up.
Okay. So you made the decision that you were going to get divorced?
Oh yeah, as
When you
soon
heard
as
the
I
podcast, you'd already made the decision? No.
so yeah, I find out of an affair in December. So I probably heard this podcast February or March
You
of
know
that
what
next
strikes
year.
me about this, Amber, is so first of all, when you were talking about asking God to change him, we could have a whole discussion about that, couldn't we?
Yeah, yeah.
But in a way, that prayer was answered, right? That prayer was answered. And then you could also see it. I have cold chills over my body right now with what I'm about to say. So you could see that as God answered that prayer. He did change him, He moved him further away from you.
Mhm.
But then God said to you, you can make a choice, right? As if, and because it strikes me with what you were saying about how you felt about divorce in the past and that you shouldn't get divorced. But it was as if God answered your prayer and then said,
Mhm.
okay, now you get to make a choice about this. It's okay. Make the choice. Have you ever thought about it that way?
No, not in so many
Interesting.
words. Yeah, I do think that God is we could have a whole conversation on God, but I just believe
Yes.
I believe that God is he doesn't it's not black and white. It's not cut and
Mhm.
dry. It's like
Yeah.
we are human beings with real emotions. We struggle through things. We deal with different addictions and afflictions and things that
Mhm.
come at us. And it's like God deals with us on a very individualized basis. Wrong is always wrong, is always right. But He does say, what I'm trying to say is this: I do believe that if someone is in an abusive situation, if someone, and abuse can look
Hmm.
different ways. Abuse can look, it can be physical, it can be mental, it can be emotional, it can be all kinds of things. If you're in a situation like that, I don't want to even say you're free to walk away. You really should not leave yourself in a
Yes.
situation like that.
Yes. I
Um,
completely agree.
and I also think there's no way I would stay in a relationship where someone's stepping out.
Hmm.
I can't. I do believe in forgiveness, and I think some people can forgive very gracefully. And I think that's great if you can. But again, life is messy. Human existence is messy. So we have messy situations. I also think that there's situations where maybe it's not necessarily abuse. Maybe it's not necessarily an affair. The lines are a little blurred. So
Hmm.
what do you do in those situations? You have to make your own decisions. You do.
And I have to say, for me, I've struggled. I was married for 30 years and I've struggled with whether or not, so I wouldn't call my marriage abuse. There were times where I experienced emotional abuse for sure. Yeah, there's no doubt about that. And as the marriage went on, it became more and more of something that I experienced. But I was very repressed. So it was an oppression that I was living through. So my narcissist, and really, by the definition, really not the misused way that we sometimes say that, I was the one who made the decision to exile everybody from my life. But that was about trying to keep the peace in a marriage. And what I realized when there were some things that happened right after I had my hypnotherapy and the way that he responded to me, which was not good, that really made me see him for the first time of who he really was and what he was doing to me in our relationship. Now, I will fully admit that I'm the one who allowed him to do that stuff, absolutely, but I couldn't see it until I got to that point in my life. And I think there's some reasons for that, my journey and the learnings that I had from it and all of that. But I came to a point very quickly where I realized that our marriage, our time together had served its purpose. And him being in my life was no longer serving my highest and best good. And I could ask him to change, to heal. And I did ask him to do that. And he resisted me and just rejected me. And it became clear to me that he was not in a place to do his own healing work. And I was moving at a much more rapid pace than he was moving at, or that he may ever move at. I don't know now. And I knew that the marriage would not ever be in a place again where it would serve my highest and best good. It had just run its course. And I chose out of self love, because I really felt like it was the right thing for me to do, to move on from the marriage. So I agree 100% with what you're saying, that if you are in an abusive situation, and like my friends and my family would tell you, oh yeah, she was being abused, that repression and that oppression, and she cut us all out of her life, they would say yes. But let's be honest about what I was actually experiencing, right? So it was never physical to my knowledge. He never stepped out or had an affair. I don't know for sure, but like I say, to my knowledge, he never did that. If there was ever any physical abuse, we rarely fought, and it was always respectful. There was never any cussing. There was never any screaming or yelling. There was never any of that kind of stuff. I guess if I had to summarize it, I would say it really became about meeting my emotional needs. And once I began to discover what my emotional needs were and I could see that he was not meeting them, I had to do what was best for me. And so I think even in that case, if you're in that place, making that choice can be okay if you need to make that choice for yourself.
Hmm.
Mm.
Yeah, and I just learned for me, it's I just can't judge. I can't judge because you don't know. And what you're describing, which I truly believe is manipulation.
Yeah,
And that
yeah,
is a form of abuse, in
it
my
is.
opinion. And to me, it's if you're being manipulated or you're being coerced to do things that you don't
Yeah,
want to do.
yeah. And
There's
there was
times,
gaslighting. Yeah.
and there's times too where it's just, it's I just think that you don't know really what
Hmm.
goes on with someone else. There's things that you may not even know yourself. Like you said, there was none of this that I was aware of. Sometimes it's just a matter of being brainwashed that you believe it becomes norm because it's over
Mm.
a long period of time. And then you look at everybody else outside as, oh, she's changed and she's this and she's that. But you're like, I didn't see that because,
Yes. It was a
no.
slow burn over 30 years.
And I think in marriage, when you get married to someone, now this is coming from a single person right now, okay? But I do think in perfect world, you're supposed to grow together. So as you grow with that person, there is a level of brainwashing. There's a level of morphing into their thoughts. And I think that's healthy because you're doing this back and forth. But when it becomes where it's like, there's things that I had boundaries that now my boundaries are let down, and not because I'm okay with it, but because I've been talked into it, that's when there's a problem.
Yeah.
And I do just want to address this too. This drives me nuts because the term narcissism is thrown around way too much.
Yes.
I have people that will come up and they're like, oh, yeah, he's such a narcissist. And I'm like, no, girl, he's not.
Don't really know what that means. Yeah.
Do you really know? But then you start throwing around some of the terms. Do you know what gaslighting is? Do you know what breadcrumbing is? Do you know what love bombing is? Do you know these things? And they may not know the term, but they know what the feeling is
Hmm.
behind it. And it's pretty safe to say that there's some of that going on.
The way I describe my ex is in the order of priority in his life, the things that were important to him. And it was always him and then interchangeably the animals, because we don't have children, didn't have children, don't have children, animals or the land that we were on, and then whatever car or tractor or whatever. And then I was somewhere like five, six, seven, or eight, right? Way down the list and never at the priority of an equal and a wife. I was never in that place in terms of what he saw and what he prioritized in life. And that was the experience that I had.
And that's hard.
Yeah,
That's
it's
hard.
hard. I read a book recently. It was a great book. It's called The Light Work, and it's by a woman named Jessica Zweig. And it's her theories and her ideas and her teachings about the work that you and I are doing now, the light work, the healing work that we're doing. But she has a section in there where she talks about relationships and when you know you're in the right place in a relationship and what a relationship actually should be. And she's talking about it in terms of the romantic interest now, but I think it's true for every relationship. Definitely in the romantic relationship that we spend so much time and give so much of yourself to someone. And what she says, it's a metaphor that she has, is that 1 plus 1 equals 11 or 1 plus 1 equals double 1. And what she's saying there is that the two people remain their whole authentic self and don't bend for the other person to something that they're not. 1 plus 1 is 2. You're not bending individually or together into something that you are not. You're maintaining yourself. And I love that so much because I think that is spot on the way a healthy relationship, we should all be engaging in healthy
Yeah.
relationships, is remaining my one, but wanting the other person to remain their one, but also growing, because I think we are supposed to always be growing and elevating in this lifetime and in doing the
Mhm.
work that we're supposed to be doing, stagnating in that place where you get together and stop growing and stagnate, but always maintaining your authentic self. I just love that metaphor. It's
Yeah.
wonderful.
There's a reality as well of that, this reality that at any point you're married, and yes, to become one is what scripture says. But there
Mm,
is this reality that at any point one can be taken. Like you could lose that person at any
hmm
time through death or
hmm
through them deciding they don't want to be with you anymore. I'm just going to walk away. I've decided I don't want to be here anymore. One of the things that I learned through my divorce that I really meditated on this a lot is that you have to hold on to things in this life so loose, because the moment that you morph yourself into this thing, whether I find identity in my kids or I find identity in my spouse or I find identity in my work or whatever, those things at any moment can be jerked out from under me, like the rug being jerked out from under me.
mm
So I love what you're saying, because you do have to maintain that authenticity, because at any point in this walk, this dance called life that we're in, at any point, anything can be taken from us. So we have to be in that place to maintain our own mental health and our own stability within ourselves.
It's so true. And that's the importance of doing the work to understand who we are as individuals, to really dig down and know ourselves, right? Learn these things. I mentioned before my emotional needs that I didn't even know what that phrase meant. So my trauma therapist is asking me this question, do you know your emotional needs? And I'm looking at her like a deer in the headlight. I'm like,
Right.
what? And it took me a while with her help and some events that happened that helped to open my eyes for me to begin to understand what those were. But that's part of me that I had no comprehension for various reasons. And doing that work, I think when we do the healing work that we do, there is an exploration of self and really coming to understand who we are and what it is that we need to thrive in life, and then figuring out how we feed that and help it rather than do things that stifle it and put us in
Yeah.
that place of oppression where for some of us the light goes out. It can, and
True.
metaphorically, and thank goodness for you it didn't happen for real, but that can we can come to that place, which
Hmm.
is not a great place to be.
Yeah. It's
Yeah.
just so important, I think, just to self growth and figuring out purpose is huge. But I think just saying, I'm going to grow and I'm going to figure out why I'm here and then what. And I love what you said about what you want, because I didn't know what I wanted until I
Mm,
started getting into a lot of business circles. And it's, oh no, you need to
mm,
like list out the things that you want. What do you revenue? What do you want in relationships? What do you want to do inside your business? What
mm,
makes you happy? What's going to
mm.
move you? Like, so I think it's so important, so much so that I make a list. I have
Yeah,
my notes pad on my
me
phone.
too.
I like have lists of these are things that I want in my life. These are things that I don't want in my life. These are non-negotiables. These are boundaries that I have. I think if you start to really meditate on those things, God will show you. Your
Yeah.
subconscious, I believe God speaks to us through the Holy Spirit, through our
Mm,
subconscious. And I
mm,
think we know everything that we need to know. It just takes sometimes quieting our mind to be able to
mm.
tap into that.
Yeah,
That's the hard
yeah.
part, right?
Yeah, that is the hard part. I do think there's also a period of time of dealing with the inner critic that's also oppressive because that can get in the way of hearing what God is saying to us, right? When that
Hmm.
is just a bunch of noise, ridiculous noise in our head. And again, that's part of the healing journey. I like that you say that the wanting, I said it and you're reiterating it, but I think so many people, probably women more so than men, struggle with the notion of saying, I want this. And that's not coming from a selfish or an arrogant or entitled place. The want that we're talking about is not that type of want. We're talking about what is it that we want to be whole, to thrive, to have a life that is fulfilled, where we have joy and we really are truly in love in every aspect of our life.
Hmm.
And that is, there's a needs and a want identification to that process for sure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And I think it goes back and forth. So you have your purpose that is going to direct everything that you
Hmm.
want. It's going to lead you to that purpose, or we can look at it from the reverse. So there's the everything that you want, and then you look at that and you figure out your purpose through looking at what you want. But I truly believe this. I think when it comes to relationships in general, there's an alignment with some people we're going to align with, and that's going to be for a time. Sometimes it's going to be for a lifetime, but sometimes it doesn't align at all.
Mm.
And if someone wants to align with me, but I don't see an alignment there, it's not personal. There's nothing personal about you. It's just I'm going in this direction and I think you're going in this direction. And I don't know that we necessarily align. And I wish people could understand this a little bit
Yeah.
better and not take it so personal because I could be friends with someone for 10 years and then all of a sudden one of us outgrows the other and we no longer align anymore. So why can't we still love each other? They say you can only know 50 people or something.
It's a small number.
Once you meet that capacity, somebody has to drop off for somebody else to enter. So, a certain capacity, if you only have a certain amount of time in the day, I want to be sure that I'm surrounding myself with people that are in alignment with my purpose because I truly feel like my life is not my own, it's God's. And if God's given me a purpose, He's given me a way to get to that purpose, then I want to be sure that I'm aligning and partnering with people that are going to help me get to that purpose because that's how we're going to benefit and impact the most people.
The ripple effect is bigger when we're with
That's
the right
right.
people. Yeah, that's when I was talking before about the people who've come into my life as I went down the path to write the book and then to launch my show and now some of the other work that I'm working on. It is those people that I am truly aligned with. And I look at what they're doing and beyond what we're doing together, their life is about creating ripple effect as well. So there is a very good alignment there of what it
Mm.
is. And I have had other people who've approached me where I feel the same way that you do, where you just don't feel that connection for one reason or another. And maybe I'm just not ready for that person at that time. And maybe 6 months down the road, I'll have an epiphany and go, oh, wait a minute, I need to go back to that. That could
Right.
happen too. But I'm also very intentional. It's one of those things that I'm seeking. I'm asking about that all the time when people come into my life of whether or not I should be working with them or not. And I also experience that in personal relationships. You were talking about the list that you wrote down of wants, and I had to go through a process. I'll end up writing about this on blog and probably will do an episode on it at some point in time. But leaving my marriage and then just the path that I had been on through relationships with men, which was a very small number of them. I was with my ex-husband for 33 years in total from the time we started dating until we got divorced, which was a big part of my life. A big part of my life before that, I wasn't old enough to even be dating. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity before I met him or since. But I've gone through a process where God's taught me and helped me to go from a place of literally my want list was a bunch of no's. I could definitely tell you not this. So it was a negative want list, if you would say, or the antithesis, the opposite of want. So I was like, no, it was very clear on that. And I went through a series of interactions with men that taught me various things that are now, I can tell you every single one of them exactly what I learned. And some of them were profound lessons that like I was like, wow, once I had come through it, to be able to create the list of what I wanted. And then it was only a couple of weeks after I literally wrote that list around Thanksgiving of last year that the person showed up. And I was like, it's amazing. So there's an intentionality to that. And I think speaking to the universe, that's probably what some people call manifesting some ways, right?
Yeah.
But being able to write that down to know it so that when you see it, when it enters your life, you can actually say yes to whatever it is that you've gone through that process for. But I also say my process, I mean, I was very open and I was seeking, and I always ask God to help me make sure that whatever I'm doing is for my highest and best good in my life generally. And I would say, I'm like, if this isn't the person, let them teach me what I meant to learn and let them leave. And literally, it would be like the light switch turned off. Like they're here today And like literally within 2 seconds, the light switch turned off and they were gone. And I was like, oh, okay, what was I meant to learn? That's the place that I went to immediately because that happens so often. And that was God saying, yeah, that's not the one, but you did learn a lesson. So go figure out what that lesson was. And I think that's probably, we're always learning, always growing. So that
Hmm.
process for all of us is something that's probably always happening. But it was, I can look back on it and, that identifying that want list, being able to write that down was a process,
Yeah.
a long process.
No, it's so true because
Mm,
when I was photographing these retreats, I learned so much from going to these retreats and just being in the room. And one of the things they talked about was be very specific what you want in making these lists.
mm,
And when I don't know, I'd been divorced a couple of years or whatever, and I thought if I were to ever get married again, these are the things that I want. And I would start to make that list, and it was a very little list. And then when you start dating, so I did the same thing that you did. As I started dating, you start adding things because you're like, that's a non-negotiable. I'm not doing
yeah.
that thing. And it's awesome. But isn't that what failure in anything is? It's okay, how can I take this, learn from it, and realize next time this is the wrong path? I
Yes.
took the path, I failed on the path. So let me go back and figure out now what's the right path. And I think that's the beauty of life.
Yes.
We're all imperfect beings. None of
Mm-hmm.
us are perfect. It may look
Mm-hmm.
really easy on social media to look at people and be like, oh, they got it all together, but people don't. They don't.
Promise you there's something there that you're not seeing on social media, and probably a lot in some cases.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I truly believe too, the more that I learn about trauma and the more that I learn from sitting with people, experts that tell me all kinds of things about trauma, I truly believe that we need to understand it as human beings. We need to understand it
Mm-hmm.
more because I think that a lot of what affects us as we walk through this journey called life is unresolved, unreleased trauma that's stored in the
Mm-hmm.
body. I don't know if you and I talked about this, but there's a book called The Body Keeps the Score. I think we talked about
I don't
that
know if
one.
we've talked about it or not, but I do know the book.
Yeah.
Yes, I do.
That
Yeah.
book was profound to me when I
Oh,
read
me
it, and
too.
I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my gosh, this
Yeah.
has so much to do
Yes,
what's happening in our bodies. And our body truly does hold that.
it does.
So learning to be able to release that and to let it go is vital to so many areas of our life. I tell people I'm on a self growth journey. I want to be the very best I can be. I want to learn as much as I can. I want to be free from any type of thing. As long as you're holding, on a very surface level, you're holding trauma, you're going to be triggered. You're going to react to things
Mhm.
that you don't get the power to choose when you're reactive.
Yeah.
It's just, oh, it's happened. Now I'm yelling and I'm screaming and I'm throwing things. I'm reactive to that. But if you can learn how to like stop, breathe, release, there's
Yes.
all these things that we can do, then that does give us the power to then relax and make a choice. How are we
Yeah.
going to respond to this
Yeah.
thing?
Respond. That's what I say. Respond. You learn to respond rather than react. But it does start with knowing the triggers.
That's
It's
right. We
asking
got to
us to
figure it
be
out.
that way. What's inside of us?
And
I saw
and
it.
I was just gonna say sometimes it goes deep. It's what causes that trigger is then here, and then there's a
Mm,
layer that's like beneath that, and there's a layer beneath that. So being able to navigate that is important, I think, too.
it is. Yeah. When I was still in my professional corporate job, I thought a lot about this quite a lot after leaving it now and talking about this very thing, trauma being inside of someone and the way that they respond, the way they behave, coming out as part of that unhealed trauma.
Mhm.
I was thought about it really from a performance review standpoint and people who were educated and very capable, smart people, but for some reason or another, they were challenged in being able to continue to progress. There was some sort of, and I'm going to use the word deficiency, I don't like that word, but that's what it would be referred to, that was keeping them from meeting what they needed to be doing to move forward. And I've looked back and thought about that over the years, several people that I really, now knowing what I know and what I've been through, I really feel like part of that was probably based in some sort of trauma that they were carrying, some sort of triggering, right? Or some sort of, for me, I mean, mine was for years was to hide. That's what I wanted to do. My inner child, that was her whole, my youngest of my inner children was to hide me. Don't be doing this show. Don't be coming on your podcast. Don't have my own podcast. Don't be speaking publicly. I'm not supposed to be doing all that when I want to hide. But that was definitely something that was in me, is just to be quiet and not really not seen. And that is definitely tied back to where the abuse began for me when I was 5. And something on that same line, and it goes back to when I was first abused by my grandfather when I was 5, I just literally shut down. And I just went into this place of I just want to hide myself. And I was like that for decades after that. What's interesting, talking about that responding instead of reacting. So as I've been looking at houses, looking at older homes, that's what I want to buy. And every single one of them that was a 2-story had this cubby hole underneath the staircase, like on the bottom level. And the first time that I opened the door, oh, what does this door do? And I open that and I see one of those. I literally had a visceral physical reaction. And that goes back to part of my experience in going through the healing process. And there's some things that I've been through where I was hiding from my grandfather, and it was all spiritual and in my mind, subconscious level, but hiding from him under a staircase. This isn't even something that I directly experienced with him, but in my healing and everything I've been through in my life and moving that relationship forward, hiding under a staircase came into the picture, right? And here I am now in real life, and I open the door, and there's this cubbyhole under a staircase, and that is I literally had a physical, startling, terrified, I'm scared reaction to something that I really had never even consciously or like physically in this human form experienced, but it's shown up subconsciously for me and in my mind as I've healed that relationship. So that the idea that we keep that stuff in us and it triggers, right? And it did it. So I saw 3 houses like that. And it wasn't until the third one that I was like, okay, I can now respond to this, which my first was a reaction, right? Just fear. I was scared. I was crying. I like literally brought up a lot of emotion, and emotion that I, for the most part, have dealt with in the past. And it wasn't until I got the third one, I was like, okay, I'm going to open this door, but I'm not going to have that reaction because I know where it's coming from. But getting to that place where you have that awareness, first of all, but even with all of the healing work I've done around that relationship in particular, I think it's always, there's some aspect of it that's always there, right? And to your point, we're always having to grow and learn and move past those things that trigger us, even when they're weird. I was like, that is just weird. And I get why it was triggering me, but it was just so strange to me that was happening.
Mm-hmm. I think too that there's this book that I'm reading. It's like the second, and I don't know if it's a series or whatever, but it's called The Emotion Code. And then now I'm reading The Body Code. I don't know if you've ever read it.
I've heard of them. I haven't read them.
By Dr. Bradley Nelson. He's an amazing guy, first of all, but this stuff has blown my mind. And doing the podcast, I was like on the tip of the iceberg of understanding energy and understanding like generational curses and understanding like what does that look like. And I always ask myself, I'm a Christian, so I always ask myself, how does this stand up to scripture? And I've been blown away by the alignment of science and scripture. But what's funny about or not funny, but what stands out to me about what you're saying is that he introduces this thing of, he doesn't call it generational curse, but he introduces this thing of that sometimes we can carry things from our mother and our grandmother, and this can go on for generations. So there could be something even energetically that has happened in your past to your mom or to your grandmother or to her mom that could have caused this. It's mind boggling to me that how the mind works and how we're all so energetically connected.
Yes.
Spiritually connected, really. You never know. But his book it's very interesting because it introduces a way of doing muscle testing to get to the bottom of these traumas.
Yeah.
Which I think is very interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. I am going to explore that. So as part of just looking for, I'm always trying out different healing modalities so I can introduce them to part of what I do to introduce them to the world.
Yeah.
Go try that. I tried it doing some of that work. So it's called family constellations is the way that I've heard it referred to. but it's that same idea that just karmically could be carrying something from a past generation. And I know that the family generational abuse is real in my family. It's actually present, but there could be, I wouldn't be surprised if there were other things that are not known to me that are being carried in
Well,
me as
even things
well.
that can happen, and you know this, Beth, but even things that happened to you, like during your abuse, during your childhood, you can store that and forget it. Like our brain, our mechanism in our brain, it's like a protection mechanism
It is.
to protect us. But
It is. It's a
eventually,
protection mechanism until it's not.
I think in the middle of trauma, it's a very necessary
Yeah.
thing. But
Yeah.
then it requires work from us. On the flip side of that, when you get to a place where you can dig back into it and heal it, I think what's unfortunate is a lot of people don't want to revisit the painful things that's happened in their life and in their past. And I think when you can't revisit it, you're going to hold on to it. And I truly believe that
Mm.
until you can release it, it's going to continue to just manifest in some way. That might look like sickness, it might look like triggers, it might look like anger. I don't know. It does different things to different people, but it's going to, it's not, you have to figure out how to release those things because otherwise they're just going to be stored there.
I agree 100%. And I also believe that once you have an awareness that you need to heal and you resist, that pressure ratchets up and life can get a little more challenging and probably more suffering until you come to that point where you do finally say, I've had enough and I'm not living this way anymore, which is the experience you had with the podcast. It's the experience that I had with my hypnotherapy and
Mhm.
that awakening. I think people refer to it as rock bottom. So what is that? And I'm curious about that, which is why I asked you that question about your experience, different from mine. And of course, neither one of us are addicts or alcoholics who have that type of a rock bottom. Although I would say with your suicidal ideation, might have been an opportunity to be at the rock bottom, right? But then you had to just move on to experience the additional things that you experienced. So, yeah. All right. So, this has been a great conversation. I've enjoyed it. It's wonderful. So, I just want to come back for just a second and just give you an opportunity to reiterate to the audience both where they can find the trauma photography project you talked about, but also your podcast and any other ways that they can find you and connect with you.
Yeah, for sure. So the podcast is through the trauma podcast. We have through the traumapodcast.com, which is if you're an audience, you want to listen to the podcast, that's the place to go. If you're interested in partnering with us in any kind of way, then you'd want to go to through the traumapodcast.online. That website is going to give you information about becoming a guest. It's going to give you information about how to, we are eventually going to do events, and my vision is huge for this because that's how much I believe in healing. That's how much I believe in partnering with other people like yourself, Beth, who is on this same alignment. We align, we have this same trajectory. We both do a podcast. We're not competitors. We are aligned to make a difference and to make an impact. So if anybody feels led to align with us in whatever way, we are doing sponsorships now and we're offering products like affiliate stuff there on the
Mm,
podcast to push things that I truly believe in.
mm,
I would never push anything I don't believe in, but because I do believe that there are people that have these things, these modalities, and there are people that need them. And I always tell people, God created me to be this conduit. So I'm just connecting people.
me too.
But yeah, that's where you can find the podcast. There is the transformation through trauma project.com. That's where you can learn a little bit about the shoots. I will be honest with you, that website's not really been updated in a while, but you can see some of the photography there. That is my photography business. We also do a lot of like stuff inside the digital marketing space,
Mm.
so helping businesses with ads and funnels and things like that. So that's where you can find me. If you want to know about my personal life, then you can always visit on Instagram. I am the underscore Amber underscore Larkins. So you can find me there. So it's a mouthful, but and then I'm on all social media. platforms. Usually you can search my name and find me.
Yes, and I will drop links to all of that in the show notes, so everyone listening to this or watching this will be able to find you. And I will just say we didn't touch much on the photography other than the project, but your work is beautiful. It really is stunning. So I was actually looking at it again earlier today, and you really are a very talented photographer of the human form, of the human body, which I think is challenging and can be difficult, and you're very gifted in doing that. So
well,
beautiful.
I jumped right into the hardest part. I'm like, give me the lighting in the studio and the fitness. I'm like the hardest genre of all. I jump right into it, but I love it. I love photographing beauty and showing women that they look beautiful, because so many women don't see themselves the way that they truly are.
Yes.
We pick that inner critic. We pick on ourselves a lot.
We do. It's what I call my wretched abuser. Because nobody can abuse me like I can abuse me.
That's right.
I call her that.
I heard someone say this. They're like, if you had a friend that was talking to you the way that you talk about yourself to yourself, would you tolerate it? No, I wouldn't hang around with that person. Why are you tolerating it when you do it?
It's so true. So true. To be the first person I'd get away from, but I can't seem to get away from myself sometimes.
No, it just keeps tagging right along.
Yeah, absolutely. So true. So true. All right. This has been wonderful. Thank you again for coming on the show. And to all the listeners out there and everybody watching, I hope you have enjoyed today's episode. Please do go into the show notes and look at where you can connect with Amber, and go follow her at least, but check out her work, because it really is amazing work that she's doing to bring light into this world. And I'm so grateful that you're here to do that.
Yeah. Thank you, Beth. It's been amazing. And I enjoyed the conversation as well.
Me too. It's been a great one. All right. Until next time, come on, everyone. Let's heal. I hope you have enjoyed today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. If you did, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Beth Jones Healing Mentor. And if you'd like to know more about me and my work to help other survivors to heal, please visit me on the web at empoweredsurvivors.com.